Hello, Bronte.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good, thanks.
Nice long weekend?
Yeah, it was actually. So, I literally went to Monster Trucks on the Saturday.
Nice.
Which was quite cool with the boys and Jen, of course. And then, we're down West Beach most of Sunday, and then Monday, I was out basically open inspection, and there was plenty of people out and about there too. So that was a good weekend.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask if long weekends have an impact, because of course real estate agents and auctioneers, you're working on weekends, especially Saturdays. So does a Monday then mean, okay, I'm going to have a busy Monday as well? Or?
It was fascinating this week, because I've got in my mind very clearly that if there's a long weekend, and let's just say that's from Saturday to Monday, in my mind, people go away on the Friday night. If they go away, Saturday, Sunday, they come back Monday. So I try and do my open inspections at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock on the Monday afternoon.
Yep.
So people can come back for the open. As a team, we had like 58 or so opens on the Saturday, 20 odd opens on the Sunday, and only one on the Monday, which was me, right? And I was like, So literally yesterday I asked the whole team, and the reality is Saturday the numbers were really good. Sunday the numbers were really good, and we had 23 people through our one open in Coromandel Valley on the Monday. So I think effectively across the board, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday of a long weekend, contrary to my sort of psychological belief, people are going to get there if they want to. So
it didn't really matter.
Numbers were really good right across the board.
And do you have many auctions on a long weekend, or do you, because I guess opens are different to auctions, you want to make sure you have as many people there for the auction who want to buy the house?
Yeah, so we had one auction which took place in Bellevue Heights, and we're just trying to work out at the moment, aren't we, James, whether there was a property that sold for $1.7 million that was 2.6 acres, which means it's over 1 hectare, which means it's a rural sale, not a residential, because that's when the contract comes into play. And this sold for $1.65 million at residentially. So is that a suburb record, or is it not a suburb record? Because residentially it's a suburb record, and there's not very many rural. So anyway, we're just trying to work out whether we got a suburb record by $200,000 or whether we missed it by $50,000. So either way, it was a good auction in Bellevue Heights, and setting a new standard.
Who makes a decision on that? Who's the real estate arbiter that comes down with the gavel and says no or
I think as long as we justify it. I don't know. It's just hard, because if you're the same goes if you're in the CBD of Adelaide and you're selling a property here, and then a commercial building sells for $15 million, you automatically, like a valuer, everybody else would completely remove that from the statistics. The same goes here. You've got a property that's like 800 square metres, or one that's 2.5 acres, which is 10,000 square metres. So I believe it is on the borderline of I believe it's more record than not. But you know what? We'll probably just sit with our sit on our hands for a period of time discussing it, do nothing about it. So yeah.
What would you do if it was a suburb record? What happened? How does that change? All it does is just advertise it, or
all it really does is just shows the market that we've broken new ground, because nobody ever wants to be the first to pay the most.
No.
So literally a vendor or an owner of a property goes, I got a suburb record. A buyer feels like, am I the idiot that just paid the most that anybody ever has in this suburb ever?
Yeah.
But what it effectively does right across the board for those that own properties in the area, not maybe for people wanting to get into the market, is it sets a new standard. It lifts the glass ceiling, and it allows everything to sort of creep up with it, because it shows confidence at a new level in the suburb. So they do have a new suburb record in a suburb. It does have a pretty strong effect. It really does. And in particular, if you're in a suburb that hasn't breached the $1 million mark, or hasn't breached the $2 million mark, or hasn't breached a number, and then it does. Like, I remember Colonel Light Gardens. I just love that suburb, just absolutely love it. And I remember it would have been 7 years ago now. If you looked at all of the sales in Colonel Light, no matter how okay, so you could get an 800 square metre State Bank bungalow that was kind of half renovated, sell for $990,000. You could get the same State Bank bungalow, because they're all very similar, with a $500,000 extension. So technically it should be $500,000 more than that one. That one sold for $990,000, and then the next one sells for $998,000. No one wanted to push above $1 million. Then we sold a property for $1,021,000, and we're like, yep, we've done it. We've broken the glass ceiling. We're on here. I remember that. It was 44 East Parkway. Then nothing happened for another year. Then 36 West Parkway sells for $1,125,000. Then we do another one on Chroma Parade, $1,130,000. Then we're on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it was on, and now Colonel Light, the most recent one was 187 or something.
Nuts.
It's really taken off. But that was, that glass ceiling held that suburb back for such a long period of time, because nobody wanted to hit seven figures.
See, I've got a different perspective on Colonel Light Gardens. When we were looking to buy a house a couple of years ago, and my husband loves it. He grew up in Adelaide. He loves the State Bank bungalows. But to me, I don't like the idea that I can only paint my fence or paint the front of my house certain colours. I don't like the idea that there's a restriction on the type of renovation you can do if you want to do an add-on. I know why, because you want to keep the heritage of the suburb, and I get it. But for me, just that mental barrier of someone telling me what I can do with my house, I couldn't get over it.
So chicken or the egg with that, I think if you look back, let's look back at maybe 10, 12 years ago with Colonel Light. If you looked all around Colonel Light, there was growth happening at greater rates, because everybody said this is so restrictive. You can't subdivide. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't put solar panels on the front of the property. You can only have a certain type of fence, two types of, and people didn't like it. Then what happened was, as regentrification happened around and people were living in homes, and the next minute there was one property next door that was 900 square metres that just got built into three, that they didn't think were good quality construction. They then go, oh my gosh, how good is Colonel Light? You know that you're always going to have a State Bank bungalow next door to you. You know there's always going to be a big block. So they really embraced it.
Yeah.
I guess if you look at like state heritage and you look at local heritage, so if a lot of character suburbs have a thing called a contributory item on them, and what that means is that it contributes to the character of the area. And demolition is highly unlikely, but if there ever was an event where they would allow it, you would have to build something that contributed equally to the character of the area. With those properties, if you want to paint your windowsills black or green or pink, you can do that. You just can't demolish the property effectively. Then you have local heritage, and there can be certain colours of which they stipulate that you can and can't do with the facade, but internally it's normally kind of fair game. Then there's state heritage where, sometimes if you need to pass wind in the back corner, you need to ask the government. You can do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's really restrictive. Like, internally it can be. Now, what used to happen, Stacey, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you read the paper, XYZ state heritage listed. And as a consumer, you looked at that and you went, wow, I want to buy that. Like, the agents were advertising state heritage listing because that was such a big thing. This was an important property, and I could buy a property that is important. Now, when people see state heritage, they get nervous, they get anxious. What does this mean? What can I do? What can't I do?
Yeah.
And it's something that you don't publicise the whole time. You're trying to work out what people can and can't do to try and mitigate people feeling restricted and doing what your reaction is to Colonel Light and getting them engaged in the property.
Yes, and it's that lack of knowledge that I think as a buyer you feel uneasy with. If you walk into a house and they said, these are the restrictions on this property, that buy it, don't buy it, but have the knowledge. Have this knowledge before you come in and decide what you might pay for it if you want it at all. As a buyer, that killed me. There was another property in Black Forest, and we were living in Black Forest at the time. Beautiful suburb. I really didn't want to leave. I even considered letterboxing our neighbours to say we just needed something a little bit bigger. My neighbours to say, we want to stay in this suburb, but 2 bedrooms is not enough. But here, can we buy your house, please? I even considered doing that because I wanted to stay in Black Forest so desperately. And there was a house around the corner from us that was up for sale. And when we got there, the agents were a little bit weird. and then said, "Oh, there's a couple of trees out the back that might be an issue, but just have a look and see what you think." And my husband, as you know, is a property valuer, and we got there and looking at the trees, and he's like, "They don't look like they're big enough to be protected or to be what's the listing? Protected tree." And then
yeah. There's like endangered,
yeah. Where they're big enough that you can't touch them. And they didn't look significant. That's the one. Thank you. There we go. We got there. And didn't look like that. And then we got home and searched it. And apparently one or two of those trees were the original ones as part of the original Black Forest. And so it was a bit murky about what you could and couldn't do with them. And then, of course, you want to be able to preserve some of that heritage of the entire suburb. So you don't want to get rid of them. But it really inhibited what you could do on the block. And then for me, again, I just went, if I'm going to be forking out so much money for a property like this, I don't want to be restricted in what I can do on it. You know, it's just, it's that knowledge. I think it's that understanding of what you can and can't do.
100%. I mean, there's also instances where I go into a property and let's just say it's 3,500 square metres in Norwood, and this has happened multiple times, and they say, "What is the property worth?" And you tell them, and they go, "But 3,500 square metres, like it should be worth 4 times the amount you're saying." And I say, "Yeah, on what basis?" And they're like, "Well, look at this block of land, look at this block of land." I said, "Understand that, but you can't remove your home to turn it into 20 blocks of land." And then they get so angry. They're like, "Well, the government needs to pay." And I'm like, "Well, no, you bought it on that basis. So you would have bought it on the basis it couldn't be cut into 20 blocks. So you would have bought it at a better price, and then you sell it at a better price." You know what I mean? It's all relative. But then there's been people bring up arguments saying, I'm so restricted. The government needs to give me discounted council rates. The government needs to do this, then needs to do that. And I won't say exactly where, but there's a property, and it's a large property, and it has what you would call a ruin on it.
Oh yeah.
And the people want to actually sort of, do development around it, and that ruin, basically, to get it back to and to get it back to where it needs to be, would probably cost $1.5 million, and at the end, it'll probably be worth $800,000. So there's this, their property is kind of impeded on doing anything, and then I think the community are like, "Well, we just want people to do something to this property," but they're like, "But we're going to lose." It's a tricky situation.
It is.
I mean, is the answer that they should be allowed to remove it? Probably not. Would it look better if they did? Yes, it probably would. Can there be an expectation that someone needs to all of a sudden spend money that's then they're going to be negatively, they're going to lose significant amounts of money. Anyway, there's some interesting stuff out there, and then there's people that I see they've got heritage on their property, and it was because their uncle decided to put it on there, and it's not of real significance, and then they're trying to remove it and they can't. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. 8223 0000 is the number to call if you've got a question for Bronte. It doesn't have to be about buying a house. You could be looking at selling or leasing or renting as well. Jump on the phone. And up next, we'll talk about there's a certain portion of the market that people earning over $120,000 can buy. And I think you'd be surprised at the percentage of homes available to that group of people. We are in the middle of Real Estate Radio with Bronte Manuel from TOOP+TOOP. So if you've got a question for him, jump on the phone. 8223 0000 is the number to call. Or maybe you've got some thoughts on different heritage aspects of houses. We were talking about Colonel Light Gardens and the State Bank bungalows in Colonel Light Gardens and the impact that has on what you can do to your property. Would love to get your thoughts. 8223 0000 is the number to call. And Bronte, unfortunately, there's been another, well, it depends who you are. We always say that. Unfortunately or fortunately, there's been another report out about Adelaide's affordability. When house prices go up, we always say if you own a house, you're rubbing your hands together saying great, but if you don't and you're trying to get into the market, you're thinking, oh, wow, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. But there was some recent reporting out that households earning $120,000, which is above the median, the average earning of an Adelaide household, could only afford 24% of the homes sold in South Australia over the past year. That's a staggering number.
So 76% of properties unaffordable for people earning, $120,000 as a household. I guess I don't really know, what to say to that, in the sense that the market has ran significantly, to your point just a moment ago. I've been in real estate now for 16 years, and my whole career, whenever a market goes up, it's been a good news story, and it's been a good news story shared by everybody. Over the last 3 years, and in particular the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, it's become a bad news story.
Yeah.
And when you see things like this, I completely get it. I completely understand it. Ultimately, unless we have more homes, I just can't see it changing. What there's definitely been, I believe, is a segmentation in wealth. And, they say the rich get richer and all that sort of stuff is what it 100% feels like. So the problem is that obviously people earning over 120,000 couldn't afford 6% of those homes. But the people that could afford those 76% of the homes didn't just scrape through. They fought it out and pushed growth, double digits again. So what that means is that there is a group of people, and I don't know what the percentages are. I don't know what the percentage of people are that are earning in different brackets, but there's definitely money out there, fortunately or unfortunately, and that's what's continuing to push the market. The only way is a supply and demand. The demand is strong, is just to increase supply.
Increase supply.
How do you increase supply? Is to increase construction.
Yep.
Because I don't think fundamentally there are people hoarding houses, or, I don't think it's about releasing houses that are already built. I think it's just getting new houses, constructed. And I know that's a whole nother game.
Well, and we're just not getting them quick enough. We got a media release out today from the Property Council of South Australia, or the SA branch of the Property Council. Housing completions data released by the ABS today shows housing supply for South Australia is still tracking well below required levels. In the June quarter, there were just over 2,800 homes completed, but that's well below what we need to reach the national target. What we need every quarter is 4,000, and we only completed 2,840. So, not even 75% of where we need to be to keep up with demand.
Yeah, I've been thinking, what is it? Because surely, if I go out on a limb and say this, if we hypothetically, the developers we need to remember are the people that we feel are the people making money.
They get a bad rap.
Exactly. Yep. If we stimulated developers, if we stimulated them in the way of, the GST components, they don't have to pay GST, or they don't have to, there's some sort of concession if they were to build a certain density of homes on a certain allotment. I'm just trying to work out, that sounds like you're making the rich richer, right? I get that. But these are the people that are kind of putting funds out there to multiply one house into 5.
Yeah.
Then we've got the counter argument of, well, I don't want 5 houses next to me. I just want the one house. Do you know what we were talking about before?
Absolutely, yeah.
So what is it? And then I guess if you go further out into the north, there's some big developments that have sort of taken place, but there's problems with water supply, sewage. Mm-hmm. What's the correction on that? If that was all correct, do we then have the, skills to build houses there? We're saying that's the problem, but do we have the skills even if we did have land ready to rock and roll? All the attention in my mind has to be 100% around getting more houses built and how do we make that happen. And the more houses we have, the more choice a buyer has. The more choice a buyer has, the less they have to fight over. If you think about right now, there's probably 20 buyers fighting over one home. If there was 20 buyers and there was 15 homes, it very dramatically changes.
Yeah.
At that point, the 15 homes are actually probably fighting for the attention of the 20 buyers.
Yeah.
Pick me, price reduction. Do you know what I mean? That's where I think it has to go. I don't understand how anything else is going to create impact rather than that. And with this, I guess the question is it sustainable? Is it sustainable that someone earning, or a household earning 120,000 can't buy 76% of the homes? I would like to think that it's not sustainable, But I feel like we're in this whole new world now.
Yeah, in the
and if you
current
look
market.
at, people don't like me talking about Sydney, but if you look at Sydney, people earning, I'm making this up, right? Don't get me wrong. But if people were earning as a household 200 grand, they probably can't buy 95% of the homes.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, has the game changed? Like, there's other places in the world where it's like, Stacey, just get it out of your mind. You don't need to buy a house. You can rent a home. The good news is every few years you can change location. Like, genuinely, that's the mindset. But the great Australian dream is you need to own a home. You need to own a home. And I don't know, are we changing? Are we becoming that you don't have to buy a home because it is so wildly unachievable? It's very deflating for me to even talk like that. But we're all trying to work the same thing out.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally understand that. Just before I let you go, Bronte, we have a question here on the text line from Rosie. Do you know why they're called the State Bank houses? I don't know the history behind that. Are you across that?
State Bank bungalows. It was actually to do post-war.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm pretty certain it was post-war through Colonel Light. And I don't know if the State Bank had something to do with that.
Yeah, no, I'm
We
not
just have
sure.
to ask
I'm
the
not sure
computer
either.
that question, but
yeah.
it was definitely to do with post-war.
We'll find out the information, Rosie, and I'll get it to you.
Don't you love that? I think it's post-war. Then I just said, it's definitely post-war.
You've convinced yourself.
Yeah, I'm convinced.
As long as you're confident, just say it with conviction.
Yeah, that's I should know that. That's my interpretation of it. And obviously the State Bank, it's either an architectural type, because they obviously all look the same, but whether the name originated, I don't know.
Yeah, no, we'll get that information to you, Rosie. Thank you for the question, and thank you for your time this week, Bronte. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Stacey. Cheers.